Good morning. Whoops. One of the things I want to make sure that everyone is aware of is that we are going to be recording today's session, and hopefully we're going to be able to then post this and allow others to kind of hear and share in the information that's being presented. The last coffee with the commissioner we held was with Dr. Kaplan and with Adam Birch. A specific topic was related to COVID-19 and really kind of we got a lot of good positive feedback from that, and we made the mistake of not hitting the record button. So this time around we are hitting the record button, and our plan is to then share this on our social media page for others to be able to hear it. So this morning, again, welcome. My name is John Arrico. I'm the Council Commissioner for the Daniel Webster Council. Joining us this morning is Jay Gary, the Scout Executive, and then Derek Wirtz, who is our COO for the Daniel Webster Council. So we do have a couple of areas and topics that we do want to cover this morning with you guys. So the areas that we plan to cover is going to be around fall registration. We're going to talk about JTE and unit of honor. We're going to talk about group sizes. That's a question that's come up a couple of times now, where there's a little bit of confusion, and we hope to provide some clarity on group activities and sizes and everything. We are going to touch on unit camping, which we'll touch on. We're also going to talk about a little bit about fundraising and where things are and some of the things that we are going to be doing in the upcoming. And then to the best of our ability, there was a question around the fact that there's a lot of activities right now that are seem to be more focused on older scouts and older kids, and what can we do at the PAC level. So we are going to attempt to try to answer a lot of these questions for you guys and provide some clarity. I think one of the first things I would like to do, though, is really kind of kick it off with asking Derek, if you don't mind, but I really would like you to be able to start by talking about fall recruitment and how, and in terms of what's currently being discussed and talked about, and some of the webinars that might be coming up that might be able to help our unit leaders with our fall registration and recruitment process.
Sure, thanks, John. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And as John said, we've been working on a lot of plans for the fall recruiting season, and have really started examining several different methods that we'll be able to share out to our units for recruiting. Upcoming over the course of the next couple of weeks will be a series of webinars, and I will publish the links for those in the Q&A in just a couple of minutes, so that you have those to be able to register if you haven't done that already. And during each of those webinars, we'll roll out the information and specifics about our fall recruiting plans. But I will share with you in high level today that we have plans for kind of all pieces of recruiting. So we're going to be focusing in on virtual recruiting, methods to potentially do small group in-person recruiting, as well as some direct marketing type things where we will attempt to engage families with school-age children, 5 to 13, by way of direct mail, specific electronic targeted communications, where we would engage them to onboard by way of that direct marketing. So there, we have on our council website, and I will put that link in the chat as well, as a membership and marketing hub. There's resources there, and that membership and marketing hub, which I can show you on our screen right now is really the hub that we're going to use and publish all of our resources. Right now, there's some specific things up there for that are static content and some best practices. But as we go through the rest of the summer here and have all of our plans laid out, every bit of resource that we have available for our units and volunteer leaders to use will reside right here in the membership and marketing hub, so that you have a one-stop place to go and get all of the resources that we have available. We will certainly have the traditional lawn signs and stickers and bookmarks and posters and those kinds of things that we make available. And if we're able to use those during the school year, we will certainly have those out and given to our units. But we're making plans and developing specific electronic medium so that we can give those out to our schools and our units to be able to share as part of a virtual process. So I would really encourage you to be a part of the one of the upcoming webinars that we have in place, so that you can get more specifics and more details, and we'll take time during each of those webinars to try to address your specific questions or make a time when we can connect with you one-on-one to address specific scenarios. And honestly, until we get some better specific guidance from the state and how school will potentially look this fall, a lot of what we have is speculation to address what we think school is going to look like and how we can recruit. So we just ask your flexibility that if we present something in one webinar and have to change direction based on the scenarios that are laid out beyond that, we're designing our recruiting plans to be as flexible as possible so that we can change course and direction quickly and try to communicate that and give you the resources that you'll need to be able to also change quickly and do some effective recruiting this fall. We'd also like you to think about retention and retaining the scouts that are already part of your pack trooper crew, and how you can engage with those families in whether it's in patrol or den settings, in some outdoor activities. Certainly, as much as you can help retain those scouts that are already in your unit, will make it easier to keep your program going if you have a strong base of families and scouts already participating.
Eric, can you go back to the council page for me, web page? Can you bring that back up?
Yep.
So can you just help people show how did you get to this page? What did you click on once you got to the council page in order to navigate to this page?
Sure. It's under resources. And then on the left side of the screen is membership and marketing hub. So more from the top navigation bar, resources, membership and marketing hub, and it'll come up there. The National Council, also at scouting.org, has a similar place that has marketing, and they call it the marketing and membership toolbox. And that has also a great deal of information, which we try not to duplicate a lot of that on our site. But those items are there also, and they have a lot of good resources. They certainly are preparing some virtual recruiting things, which we hope to have from them sometime later this week, that we'll be able to roll out as part of our webinar series. We also have some virtual toolkit things that we've developed So hopefully between the pieces that we have in place and the extra parts that we're hoping to get from the National Council, we'll be able to offer a robust virtual recruiting guidance and toolkit for you, should we need to deploy that.
Yeah. Now you mentioned, if you can stop sharing, that would be great. Now you also mentioned that that as a council that we're going to be hosting 4 webinars, and I can't remember if you mentioned when the first webinar was going to be. Can you restate that date for me?
I can. It's the first one is this Tuesday.
Okay.
So there's Tuesday and Wednesday this week, and then the next ones are August 3rd and 4th, and I will paste those dates and the links for sign up in the chat here in just a moment, and then everyone will have those things that they can pull right out of the chat.
In those webinars, right? I mean, what are the specific topics that are going to be addressed in those webinars? Like the first one that's going to be hosted on Wednesday, what's that topic going to be related to?
So the one on Wednesday, or excuse me, on Tuesday will be focused mostly towards PACs. And then the one on Wednesday, we're going to focus a little more of the conversation towards troops and crews. The basic information shared at each one is going to be very similar. So if you are a PAC and you join the one for troops and crews, you're still going to know about the basic mechanics of the fall recruiting. We're just going to talk more specifically about the older scout or younger scout programs during those sessions.
So I want to share a screen real quick with everybody, and then Derek, if you don't mind talking about it, I would greatly appreciate that. Give me a second to get it up here. And this is on the national site right now, and this is called Information About Online Registration for Councils and Unit Leaders. And what percentage of our units right now have the, let me rephrase that. What percentage of our units are using online registration for their youth today?
So all of our units have access to online registration, and it is, we have it turned on for all of our units. Only a small fraction of our units are really effectively taking advantage of that. And I will concede that it is a cumbersome process through my.scouting to go in and check on the leads and mark through those and be able to confirm all of the pieces that need to be done there. That process is being streamlined by the national office, and by August 1st, I believe the deadline is, they're supposed to have a better interface ready to go for being able to, for our unit leaders to be able to interface and review the online leads, as well as approve the applications for that. So we will do, once that platform is finished out, we will make sure that we do at least another webinar or several to be able to coach our unit leaders through using that and how to take effective use of online registration.
Yeah, and now you said a small percentage. Now the percentage I heard was basically it's like less than a third of our units are currently using this. And just to give everybody an idea, I think we have 353 units that are registered in the Daniel Webster Council. So that basically says we only have maybe 100 units today that are actively using the online youth application, because that's other units have not turned that feature on. And again, this is a link, and Derek, I don't know if you can share this link in the chat box for everybody. And I think this was going to be a webinar as well, was it not? Or a part of a webinar that was going to touch on this?
So we will talk about virtual recruiting and online resources as part of our upcoming webinars. And then once we have all of the guidelines and the new interface rolled out for the online application manager, we'll do another educational piece about that so that our unit leaders and our commissioners have better information about how to use those things.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, because the national site does have an online registration unit guidebook in there. There's explanation on volunteer roles. There's getting how you get started. So it looks like they kind of try to walk you through step by step. I'm not going to say that it's going to be an easy flow. As many of us probably know when we've tried to go into My.Scouting, sometimes some things are not as straightforward as we'd like them to be. But this is something that I think units can certainly take advantage of this upcoming year. The other thing that I don't remember if you touched on at all, but in this whole concept of bring a buddy or recruit a buddy. I know my unit. When my son was before my son aged out, a lot of our growth actually came. While we did get a lot of crossovers, we also saw a significant number of youth join because an existing scout brought their friend to the meeting, and that was where we ended up seeing a lot of our growth from. Actually, it almost became the point where it was almost even in terms of crossovers from Webelos to scouts who brought their friends. So, I think units can also, or should be, asking their youth, who else can you bring to meetings, right?
Yeah, for sure, and that's a great point, and thank you for reminding me of that. One of the things that we will be talking about for this fall is, as I think most of you are probably aware, we have our mobile scouting experience or mobile base camp trailer that we're going to be bringing around the state, and we had it in about 20 different communities last fall, and we expect to do at least that, if not more, this fall. As being a part of deploying that resource, we will probably use that as a bring a buddy experience for your pack to be able to do some small group in-person recruiting. The potential scenario may be a tiger den can come to the town park from 9 to 10 on the Saturday morning and bring each of the tigers bring a friend, and they can participate in the mobile scouting experience. And then the Webelos den comes from 1 to 2 or something like that. So we will have that as a part of being able to support the potential bring a buddy or bring a friend to your unit event, and also that resource specifically helps us tailor to smaller cohort groups, which will be important for the fall.
All right. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a break here, but I'm going to throw this next question over to Jay. It's one that got brought up in the Q&A section. It's not really necessarily a question, as it is more of a recommendation as I see it. But what are we doing from a council perspective or a district perspective in terms of building better relationships with our school superintendents and PTOs or PTAs, because let's face it, right? Back when I was a youth, recruiting through the school system was the primary way that recruiting was done. When my son joined years ago, there was they had the open house, and we walked around, and I ran into Kevin, and I know Kevin's last name, but I won't say it on here. But we joined because, hey, I knew him, and he was a friend, or he lived in my neighborhood, right? So what are we doing as a council or as a district to be able to really kind of create better relationships with our superintendents and PTOs?
Yeah, that's a fair question, John, and I appreciate you sharing, your thoughts on that. And quite frankly, our district executives are full-time professional staff. They're on the front lines of trying to foster those relationships with school leaders and administrators in each of our districts. I can tell you on the council level, we've actually been pretty good at reaching out to some of the larger SAUs. Dr. Goldhart, actually from the Manchester Public Schools, has actually been recruited to join our board, which we're really excited about his leadership and involvement. Being the single largest school system in the state, and having his leadership and guidance to help us navigate through that. I saw an article this past week that the Catholic schools plan to open, fully in the fall, and they're laying out their plans to do that. And we actually have a strong relationship with the superintendent of schools with the diocese for the Catholic schools. Same thing's true in Nashua with some of the relationships we have there, and in Portsmouth and Keene. So over the more recent years, we've done a really good job of, I think, amongst the professional staff community, opening up dialogue with many of the larger SAU superintendents so that we can have engagement with them. And of course, our DEs are working closely with most of the community SAUs in their district as well. Derek touched upon one of the volunteers mentioned, I think it was Cindy, mentioned something about in the Q&A about building relationships with those SAUs and her comments, and with the PTOs and the PTAs. I will tell you that there's nothing greater than having a scouter who has a connection to those PTO and PTAs. So having our local volunteers work with the district executive where you do have those relationships. The parents have often better relationships with the schools in the Cub Packs than we could possibly have, because they're in the school every week. So, if we can have that connection between the unit serving executive and the volunteers locally who know the schools, those are always really great. So I'd ask, folks to bring forward those relationships so that we can be a resource in helping navigate through it. We know that the fall is going to be a very unique time. We've heard that it's quite possible that outside visitors may not be allowed. That would include, scouting professionals to come into the school. If they do offer some type of hybrid programming, or, a combination of at home versus in school, which has been rumored. My sense is that obviously they'll have very tight protocols on people coming into the buildings. So we'll be relying a lot on electronic communications. Many of the schools have posting boards and electronic backpacks, if you will, to communicate information. So because of that, your point about bring a buddy is going to be even that much more critical, right, to engage families, because our invitations to scouting can very easily get buried in that long list of electronic communication. So it's really about those one-on-one relationships. But we've been working hard to broker those relationships with the schools so that we can navigate through, a challenging time.
So the next question I'm going to throw out there to you, and then I'm going to throw this one to Jay, is really kind of around some of our guidelines or some of the guidance that we as a council have put out there with respect to unit activities. The specific question is around the guidelines on the program process adaptations. And in there's wording that says that it's recommended, or it is recommending, that the patrol size of 8 youth and 2 adults, rule of 10, be followed for a gathering. But then it states in the same recommendation that a total of 50 should not be exceeded for a gathering. Can you provide a little bit of clarity as to really what does that mean? And if we have to clarify it or add better clarity on it, I mean, I know we'll certainly put out a revision for that, but what does that really mean?
Yeah, so actually what's really interesting about this, and it was a little bit difficult for us to communicate, is we recognize that in, for instance, a conventional troop, there's multiple patrols, right? So the troop wants to try to have the opportunity to gather together as a group. What we were really trying to emphasize and communicate is it's this whole premise of cohorts. We don't want cohort groups greater than 10 in individual groups in terms of the dynamic of how people meet. But the thought process was, what if somebody wants to do, let's say, a court of honor? And it's very difficult to do a court of honor with 10 people in one specific cohort. If you have an area like a park or a sports field, or even the parking lot at Camp Carpenter, for example, and you want to do a presentation with using a public address system and maybe have a court of honor type of scenario, what we basically wanted to communicate is you could set up in an environment outdoors a larger distribution of people, but in separate cohorts. So you shouldn't have greater than 50 people in any one assembly, but those cohort groups really should remain at 10. And what that means, and I use the term, if you think of a beehive, I always use the term of cross-pollination, right? You don't want people from one hive of 10 going over to the other hive of 10. So you don't want to, basically infect a hive of people by interacting those cohort groups. So you're really supposed to keep no greater than 10. Those folks are in one cohort, using adequate social distancing, 6 feet apart, wearing masks, and you can separate or segregate those cohort groups of 10 up to 5 cohorts. So, a total of 50 people max in any one environment. And, in recent days, we've had some guidance from Dr. Chan specifically, our state epidemiologist, and we're pretty much in alignment with what the state's recommendations are in terms of group dynamic. And we also had the Deputy Director of Public Health give us some guidance as well. And their emphasis is that, the vector of spread for COVID-19 really involves controlling groups so that you're not in a mass assembly. So I really want to emphasize that while we say 50, we don't mean 50 people all together in one space. We want really, 5 separate hives of cohort groups of 10 people, well separated and well defined as separate and distinct groups.
And like you said, you use the court of honor, which is a troop related activity, right? But that could be easily, like, if the family shows up, they could be a family of 4, and that's one cohort, right? And then you could have other families of 10. Again, I mean, it doesn't need to be limited to 5 cohorts, as long as the sum of all those cohort groups does not exceed the 50, correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, which actually then leads me into another question that's come up, and it's actually come up quite often. At what point our unit, and then with respect to PACs, obviously, right? Then PACs could host like an award type ceremony if they wanted to, where they could hand out, where somebody has earned their bear badge or their wolf badge, and again, that could be a PAC activity, but as long as they're broken out separately in the families, and that gathering doesn't exceed, again, the 50 max, right?
Right, exactly. So, obviously for a Cub Pack, navigating something like, let's say, for instance, a Pinewood Derby activity, you could hypothetically run, maybe 5 different distinct groups through in cohorts of 10, but you wouldn't want 30 people gathered around the racetrack, right? So you
Right.
want people to be using adequate social distancing, and you could, hypothetically speaking, bring larger group dynamics together, but in separate and distinct groups of 10.
Yeah, and you brought up the Pinewood Derby. I remember when, again, when my son was in Scouts, we had a tiger division, we had like a wolf bear division, and then we had the Webelos division. So we had it broken into like 3 divisions. So like you said, I mean, a pack could potentially host a Pinewood Derby, and then have it where it's the tigers are going to be from 9 to 11 type of deal, right? And then, there's an hour where the pack can kind of go around and disinfect and all that stuff, and then the next group can kind of come in and run their event and stuff like that. So there's a way that things can be done, but as long as social distancing is still maintained. So the next area that I want to go in, and I'm going to keep you in the spotlight, Jay, here for a second. Unit camping. It's a topic that has come up. We obviously opened up our camps to family camping, and I know that there are families that are taking advantage of that. But with specific to unit camping, where do we stand as a council at the moment in terms of allowing units to be able to go camping?
So yeah, I'm glad you asked the question, because quite frankly, we're just on the cusp of getting ready to release some overnight camping guidance for our units, and this will follow the same. It'll follow a similar thread to what the activity programs and our activity guidance shares. The only nuance there is this is a function that will not allow cohort groups, of 5 distinct groups of 10 up to 50. We're going to limit the activity overnight camping guidance to allow camping groups of no greater than 10. We're going to provide some information to units this week where we'll actually share the information that they'll need to offer troop or pack-based camping. Obviously Cub packs are supposed to be in a one-to-one situation, parent to scout. Troops are going to be allowed to start fostering overnight camping, but there'll be very specific guidelines related to how to manage the tent camping accommodations as well as transportation, and that'll be specifically related to no group group sizes related to 10 in a campsite. So using adequate social distancing, proper sanitization, and also symptom monitoring and those types of situations that have been already laid out in activity guidance. We had a great meeting with Patricia Tilley. I mentioned the Deputy Director of Public Health for the state, as well as Dr. Chan. It was fantastic to be able to have about 45 minutes of their time directly, because as you know, we've been trying to navigate between the sports and athletic guidance that's out there, the day camp guidance, the residential camp guidance, and then the general state reopening guidance. And as you navigate through all those documents, one of the things that's difficult to sort of figure out is, well, what do we do in a scout troop situation, or a local unit situation where they're trying to camp? And really what we were trying to figure out is what would happen when we want scouts to, can we do 10 camping? Can we put 2 scouts into a Eureka timberline, if you will? And so, what the state really shared is that, the theme of 10 groups of 10 being together is just fine. That, if we use symptom monitoring and adequate social distancing, that will work. They encouraged us to allow scouts to tent 1 per tent. In cases where you have younger scouts who may not want to tent in 1 per tent, but they might want a buddy, that would be allowable, but that they sleep head to toe. So we're going to have some guidance out here probably within the next week that will allow units to start softening some of their programming so that they can open and have some of those overnight experiences. If we've got a troop that wants to go on a backpacking trip, there'll be some guidance certainly available where they'll have the ability to do that. Obviously, it's going to put an emphasis on no sharing of equipment. There'll be, some guidance in there too about how to foster meals. There's going to be more use of disposable, resources like, plastic spoons or plates, so that there's, again, not a lot of, integration in a communal basis of food preparation and that type of thing. So those are some things we're going to ask units to think about when they do overnight camping. The nuances with transportation will relate to, families, if they want to travel, let's say somewhere up into the northern part of the state in Coos County, and you've got a group of 10 scouts, it's, some people will ask, it's going to be difficult to have 10 scouts driven up to, Pittsburgh. So how do we get up there? The state really emphasized that if we have anybody that rides together in a vehicle, that they camp together. So 2 scouts in a car that ride up together would be the same 2 scouts in that car camping overnight together. So you can really see a theme that, they really want communal groups to be small, and they want people to really, be together. And then obviously symptom checking So the same type of guidelines that exist there for troops to meet and gather in their meeting space. We want people to take temperatures, sign the parental consent forms, and then monitor all of the adequate sanitization. So there'll be something coming out this week, which is really exciting for troops that are really eager to get going with some outdoor programming and packs as well. We are going to reopen the camps to troop and pack overnight camping as well, so that it'll go beyond family camping. We notified our rangers yesterday that we're working on that and got some feedback from them. And our camps are going to be ready, at least at Camp Carpenter and at GSR, specifically Hidden Valley, because that's where our water is on. So we did not reopen our water at Bell yet. So we're going to encourage our units to camp out at GSR if they'd like to come as a group of 10 to do some tent camping and overnight experiences there. And we'll have some camp guidance as well when they come in. Certainly there's plenty of activities there at GSR for folks to maybe access the waterfront or go up on some nice hiking trips.
Yeah. So the one thing I want to just quickly bring up, and I know he's currently online and listening, and he actually shared this with me, which is Brian Savigny, and he said that when their unit tends to think of things, they look at it from a time perspective, from a place perspective, a people and a space perspective, and a lot of what you just said it's all related to those four words: time, place, people, and space. And it really, again, it reemphasizes what the state has said, which is, you can get together, but it's really about limiting the amount of time that you spend really kind of with each other and looking at where it's going to be held and the space, indoors versus outdoors. And it's really trying to take into account all of that because if my number is correct, there's 38 states that have kind of reversed and are in a surge mode right now. And here in New Hampshire, we're not, but there are states that have actually reversed course. So I think it's really important that we're doing our best, really, on that front.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, if I could too, John, I don't know if folks have seen this, but in the last week, I'm comforted, to be honest, with our decision making as it relates to the closure of our camps for summer resident camping, because obviously the guidance that was provided would have been very difficult to navigate with the testing of campers, as well as the multiple testing of camp staff and the self-quarantine for 2 weeks before you open, and a whole bunch of provisions that were there. But just regrettably, this past week, there's been 2 large news stories. I believe one was out of Arkansas and the other one was out of Georgia, about a Christian camp that reopened and had, several dozen people contract COVID-19. And the camp there was a YMCA camp in Georgia that had over 30 people exposed. So, obviously this is very real. Our youth are often asymptomatic when they don't present symptoms, and so it's very difficult. So from the state's perspective, at least here in New Hampshire, and what we're doing to protect our scouts and families is to limit those group sizes so that we don't have quite as much contact. And if there is an exposure, you can think about, if you have a cohort group of 10, it's a lot easier for contact tracers to go back and work with the 10 families as opposed to 50 people who might be exposed to the spread. So that's really the baseline reason of trying to limit the size and scale of exposed groups when they're out, doing activity.
Derek, I'm going to throw this one at you. There was a question in the Q&A about are the marketing and membership sessions for troops on July 15th and August 4th the same, or will different topics be addressed or be discussed?
Yeah, good question. And the basic outline of the discussion is going to be the same, and the same slide deck, if you will. But given the period of time between the 2 discussions and the changing dynamics of the pandemic and information that we learn, we may, in the one in August, be able to share something a little more up to date or better focused on the situation as we know it at that point, 2 weeks later. So, but yes, the content is intended to be the same and repeated, so you don't have to attend twice.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen again, and as we kind of shift to the next topic that was asked, and that was around JTE and Unit of Honor. So give me a second while I switch over for you guys. All right, so I'm going to bring up the Unit of Honor form, and we're going to talk about that. But the first thing I'm going to hit on is JTE, and Jay and Derek, you guys can pipe in if I state something wrong. But as of right now, we've not been provided any indication from the national office that there will be amendments to the Journey to Excellence. I think what I've heard is that they want units to do their best, and in terms of Journey to Excellence. I can only speculate that maybe there'll be some modifications as we kind of get closer, but at this point in time, we've not received any notification or heard of anything that says that Journey to Excellence will be amended. Is that correct from what you're hearing as well?
That's correct.
Yeah, so, and I've heard that there is a team that's evaluating whether they'll make any modifications, but for the current period, they've told us to just continue to your point, to do your best to try to strive to achieve the existing goals. And if there are any modifications, certainly we would make sure to get that out as soon as we could. Right. But there's currently nothing that's been revised or updated.
Okay. So which will migrate over to the Unit of Honor, which is specific to the Daniel Webster Council. And I know that there are actually some units that are striving to become a Unit of Honor and everything else. I spoke to, I can't think of the PAC number, but it was out in Walpole, New Hampshire in the past week. So as it kind of relates to this, there are going to be modifications to the Daniel Webster Council Unit of Honor. There's some things that we think and believe that are still doable. So while, for example, like Friends of Scouting is one of the requirements. While you may not be able to have a physical presentation, one of the things that you guys can offer as units, if you haven't already done so, and I believe communication's gone out on this, is to offer a mobile cause for your unit for Friends of Scouting. So that money anything that's raised through mobile cause would be something that would go and be credited towards your group. So if you were to participate in mobile cause, you can basically, what I'm going to say, almost check the box in terms of Friends of Scouting. Participate in an annual council product sale. We just got done. I know adventure cards, I don't think we've actually got the final numbers yet, because I think units still have a few more days to turn in adventure cards. But we did have the maple syrup sale this past spring. We had about 25, 30 units participate in it. And they did quite well. I know I just saw where we've kicked off some of the online popcorn as an opportunity for units to be able to go out and promote. But I also know, though, that we're also introducing a new fundraiser as well for units, which I think would also help fall into this category. And that from what I understand, is going to be called the 1,000 Miles or Bust fundraiser. And what the 1,000 Miles or Bust fundraiser is, those of you who've been in scouting long enough and here in the Daniel Webster Council remember the old hike-a-thon, and it had gone away a little bit. And basically it's being brought back and rebranded as 1,000 Miles or Bust. And the way that's going to work, as I understand it, is units are going to have the opportunity to hike over a 1 weekend period. And they can hike both days, which is currently scheduled for August 29th and 30th, or they can pick one of the days. And what's being asked is that a scout or adult or family, that they go out and hike 1 mile at a minimum. But the goal is that as a council, we want to be able to reach to say, hey, our units got together on August 29th and 30th and hiked over 1,000 miles and raised X. Now you're probably saying, well, what's the cut, right? And the cut's going to be pretty simple. 75% of what what the unit raises stays in the unit, and 25% would come to the council. We're actually also offering, I believe, from when I was talking to Eric Goulet yesterday about this, an additional incentive on that as well, where each of the top fundraising units in each of the respective programs. So, you know, somebody at so the top raising troop would get 80%, and that's only going to be offered to the one unit. The top selling pack or fundraising pack would get 80%, crews and posts and stuff like that. So there's an opportunity there for you guys to do something. I'm going to skip right now new family engagement because we'll come back to that. Obviously, summer camp is a bust, but with summer camp being a bust, you know, there is still an opportunity where, you know, if you guys have scouts who participate in the Granite Base Camp, that's an opportunity where you can say, you know, we had one scout participate in Granite Base Camp. We had 16 scouts. You know, we're not going to measure that on the number necessarily of youth that participate in Granite Base Camp, but participation in Granite Base Camp, and we'll come out with an amended form and all that here in a little bit, but Granite Base Camp participation would count for basically item number 5. I think quality leadership, this is something that every unit should strive for, is to have at least 60% of their registered leaders, especially the front-facing ones. Those are your cub master, your den leaders, that they really be 100% trained. I know this year it's going to be a little bit difficult in some cases because, you know, we're not able right now to offer IOLS or Blue, but that is something that is doable. And then of course, free charter. You know, I think when we look at new family engagement, we really went back and looked at that in the past year from one year to the next. And, you know, so a unit that has less than 10 youth, and one of the things that Derek mentioned earlier was really, it's gonna be all about retention, right? This year is what can we do to retain? But if you can, but again, I mean, you know, we still have to take a look at this here. But if a unit has less than 10 youth, what the ask is can you grow by 1? And so again, going back to bring a buddy and getting a buddy to register, I think can all kind of help in that process. So again, we are going to be taking a look at it. In order to meet Unit of Honor, it's not going to be all 7 requirements are going to have to be checked as yes. There will be a modification that's made. And again, we will be getting that out to you guys in a little bit. So, okay. All right. So did anything that you guys want to add on, you know, Unit of Honor or any of those areas that I just touched upon that you think needs a little additional clarification?
I don't have anything specific, John. I just want to commend the units, and I've been emphasizing this quite a bit, a lot, you know, over the last couple of months. You know, I've been very, very impressed with the way in which our units have adapted to this very difficult set of circumstances. And you know, I'm actually very enthusiastic about the level of support that we've been getting from our volunteers everywhere, from our Friends of Scouting campaign. You mentioned Mobile Cause, you know, just the generosity of our families to remain committed to scouting and keep a central focus on that, to the virtual learning experiences that our units have had, and then some of the adaptability that I've seen many of our scouting units start to, you know, be able to foster. That's a great thing about scouting, right? Is people find ways to lead and get through difficult times. So, you know, I'm just always compelled by the generosity and the engagement of our volunteers, you know, and as an example, the Scout Supports Hospitals initiative, you know, that was a huge thing that I think our units should pat themselves on the back to support, you know, dozens of hospitals throughout the state with, just thousands of items that they donated to support our frontline workers. It feels good to be in scouting when all those great things happen. So, the thing I would emphasize with the Unit of Honor is this just a nice way of recognizing all that good work. So I would certainly encourage people to pay attention to it and get the recognition that they deserve for doing such great work, through a very challenging environment.
So this one here, and I was hoping I was trying to add a fourth panelist this morning to try to help us a little bit with this last topic, and but it's around PAC activities, and how can we help PACs with more activities? It seems like a lot of the focus has really been more towards the older youth, is the current perception. So what can be done in order to help PACs with some of their activities and everything else? Any thoughts or ideas that you guys have?
Yeah, a couple things, John, that are available is obviously being able to use our camp facilities to be able to get outside is one place, and following the guidelines that we laid out. I know that there are a lot of communities where the parks and school grounds are still closed for group gatherings. So using the resources of our camps are certainly an opportunity to get outside. The Daniel Webster Council is part of a task force working with the national office where all of the Cub Scout adventures are going to be put online as a virtual electronic experience that families individually will be able to take advantage of. That's on an accelerated timeline, so that will be available for all of our families starting later this summer, so that resource is available that den leaders can use to help facilitate their program or direct families right to those pieces to do individually.
Okay. Now, and then I know one of the things that we had issued within the last, I think within the last 2 weeks, there was some supplemental unit activity guidelines as well, which I think breaks down in more detail too, in terms of helping units to basically be able to run some day-related activities, and to be able to run them in a safe manner. As I think they could also use some of that. I think also in terms of, you mentioned getting them outside. You're absolutely right in terms of using some of our camp facilities. We opened up Camp Whippoorwill in Merrimack is available for use. Hogue Base is available for use. Camp Carpenter is available for use. And so is GSR, that's also available for use. So, if you can't do anything, and just so everybody knows too, you do need to reserve those spaces in advance. There was some use of council property guidelines that was issued recently, so you should be able to find that. And if you could, Derek, include the link to the COVID-19 resources, where that's located on our webpage for these guys as well.
I will, and I was going to mention that, John. So thank you. And right on I'll put the link directly to it, but right on the landing page of nhscouting.org is a link to the COVID-19 resources. And one of the pages that links to is our council's Scouting at Home resources and some specific program build outs there that we have started to create, and it'll give you a little bit of a teaser of what the resources that will be coming from the national office for each of those Cub adventure items are. And we'll show you some of the things that we've developed, and we've engaged some of our local units to help us develop. So I will drop the link to that in the chat here in just a minute.
Okay. And I also have seen too, and I don't know if everybody has seen it, but there's like these 30-day challenges. And I know I've seen it for like tigers and wolf and bear and stuff like that. Are there Are there links also available anywhere on our website that if somebody wants to find that, they can?
There is not a link directly there, but there's a link to the scouting.org website that has the links to all of those different 30-day challenges as part of their COVID-19 resources. We've tried to not necessarily duplicate some of the links in case they change and become broken. So, but yes, if you follow our outlink to the BSA's COVID-19 resource page, you can get the 30-day challenge things right there.
Okay, great. All right. Well, with that, I mean, there's anybody, any of you guys want to end on something? Actually, Jay, real quick, in your background, I see some words as I'm facing you. They're to my left, to your right, but it says survive, emerge, and thrive. Can you just, what does that mean?
Yeah, so obviously our focus is to get back to growth as a council, and really focus on, being the Daniel Webster Council that we historically are known as. We want to run dynamic and really exciting programs for our Scout youth. It's difficult through this period of time to have to adapt, where we'd love nothing more than to open up Camp Carpenter and run an eye blast in the fall, or run really great programming. So what we've been doing is really focusing on stability right now, making sure that the units have the resources that they need to continue to be able to facilitate the best possible programming they can. And as a council, our focus has been on making sure that we have the resources intact to ensure that we can meet the needs of our families. That's our primary goal as a council, right? We're in the business of serving our scouting families, and we're here to give them the best possible program we can. So maintaining fiscal stability through that time has been, a large focus of our board, ensuring that we survive through this without having to limit our resources and, or reduce or have to be largely impacted. And so, I would commend our board on their focus to help us survive through this. I will mention that we've on the council level, at least on the fiduciary side, we've taken advantage of the payroll protection program. That's a resource that's there to help us survive, and we've benefited from that. We've also applied for the state's NERF grant, which is focused in on nonprofits. The governor released $60 million to support nonprofits, and many people heard about the Main Street grant. They just announced this past week that over 5,000 businesses benefited from that. So NERF is an extension of that Main Street grant for nonprofits. So we're waiting to hear what resources are there. So as we survive through the pandemic and bring greater stability to the council, our hope is to emerge from this crisis and get back to thriving as a business. And so I would certainly encourage our volunteers and those who are actively engaged, if they're connected to resources they think we ought to be taking a look at, to share with us what they feel we can do better. We're always open to communication to make sure that we can offer the best possible program experiences we can to our youth. We also write a whole number of grants. We've got some grants out to a lot of our supporters. In fact, I'll mention, just to throw a little plug for Mascoma Bank. They just sponsored the Granite Base Camp at Home Camp in the Box program, Adventure Kits. They gave us a $7,500 donation to support the program for our youth. So we're reaching out to all of our corporate partners, our foundations. We're working very, very hard to ensure the best possible outcome for the council, where we have been largely impacted from this. And our goal is to get back to thrive. We want to win.
Yeah. So I do want to bring this to an end, so to allow everybody to have their day back. I know it's raining and not great, the best weather out. You've mentioned a lot in terms of fundraising. You've mentioned a lot in terms of grant writing. I'm going to ask you a hard question here right now, and so we'll see. What are you doing about cutting costs?
So we've actually done quite a bit. In fact, we closed the service center through the summer months, so we're not air conditioning the space. We've looked at every little tiny expense that we have, all the way down to, you know, the dumpster at the council service center. We're looking at all aspects of our expenses. I will tell you that the leadership, you know, took a voluntary reduction of 10% compensation for the year from the senior management team. Our support staff has had some reduced hours, and we're finding ways to be nimble and resourceful. You know, with the support of the PPP, we fortunately have been able to sustain the level of services we have. But, you know, obviously we've looked at not wasting the resources of the council, but actually working really hard to sustain the resources we have and not negatively impact what we've got going. So there's been a whole lot of effort put into the budget planning process, looking at our expenses very closely. And, you know, I've certainly allowed Derek to add anything that I might have missed, but we're being very nimble in what we do across the board. And fortunately, we've been able to keep our workforce available to our staff or to our volunteers so that everybody can benefit from, you know, having a direct contact unit serving executive to help support their program. And our rangers have been working hard at ensuring that our properties are well kept and have been working, quite frankly, on projects that they aren't ordinarily able to touch because we're actively serving our youth. So, you know, there's a lot of activity there for sure. And every day we're constantly looking at what we can bring in terms of services to our families. And the Granite Base Camp is a good example of that. You know, how could we be nimble? And, you know, I have to say that it's really, I just want to add this, John, is that it's really, really important to ensure that our scouts this summer receive advancement. So I know many units are doing some of their own things, but if for some reason there's not a lot of activity, taking advantage of the Granite Base Camp at home is really, really great, because Mark Hamill and his group are working hard at Camp Carpenter to give Cub Scouts an experience. You talked about that. What are we doing for Cub Scouts? Take advantage of the adventure kit this summer. You know, participate in one of the virtual campfires or do some fun things with our Cub Scouts. Same thing with GSR. We maintain some of our staffing at GSR. You know, Alan Parker and his team have been doing a great job on the program side. So there's no reason why our scouts should miss out on at least some form of experience. I know it's not the same as being in the dining hall at GSR or being at Camp Carpenter for fun activities during the day. But it is something for our Cub Scouts and Scout BSA youth and all of the members that we have. So I hope everyone takes advantage of that program and not misses out on those advancement opportunities.
Great, great. All right, and with that, I don't see any Q&As. That I think we've got all those. So you know, at that point, I'd say I'm going to let everybody have the rest of their weekend back. I hope you guys have enjoyed this this session, this Q&A session, where we've touched on some topics. You know, we do our best to answer them as fully and as best as we can. And we will be scheduling another one. I'm probably going to take a little bit of a break. This is my third one here in 4 weeks. So I am going to take a break probably, and then we'll come back in the month of August with another coffee with the commissioner and addressing some more of your questions and concerns that you guys may have. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time out in your day and for caring so much about the program and for caring so much about our youth. So thank you very much. So.